Welcome to the assembly session in association with Etisalat. We've been doing these IoT sessions every month, and we've been concentrating on different topics. And I think we've got a good one for you today. This is something that we have covered before, but which we will also be covering in more detail today, and we'll be showing you a new aspect to it. So there'll be plenty for you to learn here. So just a little bit about the assembly to start you off with. You would have seen some of it in the preview as well. We're a smart lab and makerspace that's been based out of In5, which is the startup incubator for Dubai Internet City since 2014. And we do free workshops for the community weekly. And we've done over 300 workshops now. I mean, this one needs to be updated from almost to over, because we do have a very rapid pattern where we do workshops every week, and they're not just restricted to IoT. We have a few different categories in which we classify our workshops. We have assembly hack workshops. IoT does come under that, but also other embedded systems where you're working with Raspberry Pi or the Arduino. So all of this comes under assembly hack. We provide, when we do live workshops, we provide the hardware, so people only need to bring their laptop, and all the other material is available to them, as well as the information about what they are going to be doing. Assembly code workshops are purely code-based ones. So where we use software, we show people how to work with new frameworks, new APIs, show them how to work with new languages also. Nowadays, there are so many different ones. And of course, we also concentrate on assembly data science. Data science is, of course, is an umbrella term which would cover a lot of what comes under artificial intelligence, machine learning, and of course, just general data science. Like last week, we did an image processing workshop. Our audience ranges from all across. We have students, professionals, and entrepreneurs. Obviously, we are in an entrepreneurship hub. We don't restrict by background. We don't restrict by age. Anyone who has an interest in technology, we try to make it accessible for all of them. We focus on practical applications. So we try to get you to build stuff rather than just learning about the theory of it. And that's why we're hoping today also that we will build something along with you. You can sign up on our forum as well if you would like to get the RSVP, if you'd like to RSVP to future events. We have a few different ways of communicating with our community. We are very active on social media at Make Smart Things is our handle on Facebook, Twitter, as well as Instagram. And of course, you can find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. So if you sign up for the forum, you'll find a lot of the past workshop info as well as like photos, and we're very active on social media. And of course, you can also find the resources required. Okay, so before we get started, I'm just going to go over what we need. This is something we've sent out to everyone. You need to activate the free ThingWorks developer account and PTC Cloud trial. So ThingWorks is an enterprise software, of course, and usually you have to install it using Apache, Postgres, and a database, as if you were doing it on a live server account, even with the trial version. But a new thing that PTC has done in the last, I'd say probably like few months or so, is they've actually started giving access to their cloud version, including for the trial. So there is a free PTC Cloud trial that you can access. And I hope that, since we've circulated that before, I hope all of you are already connected on that. You are going to need that. That's what the software is. You don't need to download anything for that. You just need to, you just need to sign up and just activate your cloud account. I'll also be using the cloud version although I have the installed version, just so that we can be on parity there. There's nothing else required to download. There's a small entity data set. We are going to, rather than creating some of the stuff that we've already done in the past, there is a small data set, so you can just download this link. I'm going to leave it up so you can see it's the same link you used to register, zoom.theassembly.ae/fleetmanagement.twx. TWX is the ThingWorks file extension, and this contains entities. So this is the serialized version of objects that I want to import into our server. Obviously, we'll be starting from scratch. So if you want access to things that I'll explain that to you in a little bit. So please just download this file. It's just 20 KB. So you just need to download it and we'll be using that in a short while. Okay. Quick recap of things we've seen before, and this will make more sense once we've done that. I'm not going to go into detail on this. What you have to remember is, of course, ThingWorks. When I mentioned ThingWorks, we're talking about ThingWorks Foundation or ThingWorks on the cloud, which is a cloud-based interface for modeling our data. And we've seen this in the past that it's very easy to model data on ThingWorks because of things like templates and shapes. So we've used shapes in the past, but I just want you to focus on thing templates for now. So a thing is a data model that's stored in the cloud for real world objects. So if you had, for example, in our example, we're going to use vehicle tracking as our use case. So a car and a truck would be two separate things because they would be sending data over to the cloud. So those are two things under the ThingWorks parlance. So those separate things have some common characteristics which are put into templates. So in case you have a fleet of 15 cars, you don't want to define properties separately for 15 cars. So you create a template and then you just derive from that. For those of you with a programming background, that would be like a base class for you. So a thing template is really important. We are going to use thing templates today, but all you need to know is that everything has to derive from a thing template. Okay, there are some built-in thing templates that we can use, which are provided there, but we'll also see how you can customize your thing templates. So that's just one important thing to remember. We've covered this in the past. I'm just bringing this up so that we get some detail on that. Okay, the second point that we do need to recap from previous sessions, and you can see more, by the way, on the developer ThingWorks, which you signed up for. You can definitely catch up on more stuff there. Another thing that we want to see is you want to understand the distinction between current data, which comes from real world objects. So your cars, for example, are sending data over. We want to distinguish current data versus historical data. By default, ThingWorks only stores the current value. So if you are storing, say, the speed of a car, right? So ThingWorks at the time would store your speed, and then as soon as the speed changes, it would just toss it away by default. That's where something called a value stream comes in. A value stream is a particular type of object, and I will show this to you later, so don't worry about that. A value stream stores historical values for things. So on things, we have a property called logged property, a logged flag. When we set that on, it starts storing the historical values. So when a speed value is stored and the next one comes along, it is serialized to our database, which is stored in this value stream. So value stream is really important, and we want to remember ThingWorks templates because we will be using that. Okay, the values from a value stream are retrieved through a service called query property history. So I think this is just covering stuff that we've talked about in the previous session. I'm going to bring up, before I get on to the next slide, we'll come back to this. So most of you would have come to a scene like this. Like if you have created your ThingWorks, once you've done your trial and you've created that, this is on developer.thingworks, you would have started up. Just to save time, I've actually launched my server already. So this is the host name. So these are things you need to remember. One thing that you have to remember in the past, when we've used ThingWorks, we've sometimes been able to add the username and login, but now they've made a change where you have to click on launch to launch the ThingWorks online instance. So make sure you click through from here once you are connected. So by default, it'll say server start, and you want to actually hit server start, and it'll take some time. Then after it comes and it changes to launch and stop, and it says server status running, you want to hit launch. So I'm assuming you've all done that already. So this is what it looks like. Okay. So coming back to this is our, now many of you who attended the previous sessions would be familiar with this. This is our ThingWorks composer. Okay, so when I say ThingWorks Foundation, ThingWorks Cloud, this is where all this stuff happens. So you can see a lot of different options here and things that you can do. One thing I do want you to do before we start itself, you need to go to, like, on the left menu, you can see there is a few further down, you can see an import export wizard. We need this import export wizard because we are going to import the file that I told you about earlier, which is the fleetmanagement.twx. Those will get us some preset and examples that we can use instantly. Just click on import, and this will bring up this panel here. What I need to do is I need to just browse. You can leave everything else as it is. Just browse here and just say open and import. Okay, so it's a very small file, so you can see it's actually added a new project here. Projects are something that is slightly new in ThingWorks. Projects allow you to logically, collect all your things and thing templates and different words. One of the favorite features that I like now that there has been introduced in ThingWorks 9.1 is Project View, where you can view everything isolated by project. Remember, this is a multi-tenant system, so you could have many different projects. So it's important that you have a project view so you can see the things that you want to see. So my project that you have just imported, and you would also get the same, of course, it contains the project file, but it also contains a few different things, which I'm going to explain to you later, but I just wanted to show it to you here. So there are thing templates. We've already talked about thing templates, and there's also a mashup. A mashup is a web interface, which is going to be our key focus here. So do keep that in mind. Okay, I'm going to come back to my, ThingWorks just to show you an example of a mashup. So one more new thing that ThingWorks has done under resources, you can see they've got ThingWorks demos. So where you can actually view different demos. They've started with just one, and I'm just going to open that up. Okay, if you'll notice, this is actually like running a version of ThingWorks runtime that we can also execute from Composer, and we'll be showing you how to do that now. But these are the kind of dashboards that we can build. So you can see it's not just one page, it's got multiple things, and there are different widgets in each of them. And they are also cross-linked. That's really important. So you can see this is not static data, by the way. This is live data that is coming from the ThingWorks cloud. If you log into here, I mean, this is probably a typical dashboard that you would see. If you clicked on the orders, it would take you to the other panel. And this is all under ThingWorks runtime. So once you do that, there are forms here. There are contact forms. If you wanted to send messages, if you wanted to reroute trucks, for example, you wanted to recall order. It's not loading also right now, but there is actually a route also. There's supposed to be a map instance here, but something is not working on that. But you can see all the different items. Everything can be logged in. There's even more information under personnel, and it's all mapped to each other. So if I click on orders, it'll take me to the deliveries scale and pick up the exact order. And of course, there are even like high-level views, like sales views. So you could see, if you didn't want to bother with the personal details, you could, individual details, you could see graphs that are classified by month. And these are all done through widgets in the mashup. So you can import media, you can see graphs and do different things, and you can compare it to specific, if you wanted to do comparison. So there is a lot of rich data that you can do. So this is just a good example. And this is, very similar to something that we aim to build. And one of the beauties of ThingWorks is that you can do something like this quite easily. So I'm just going to close this now. And if we come back to this, the way we do that, ignore the things for now. I'll come back to an explanation on this later. But I'm going to actually take you to the tool that we need to use most, the most today, which is Mashup Builder. I mean, we've used Mashup Builder in all our previous workshops. I mean, Mashup Builder is a big thing in ThingWorks, and it's something that you don't really want to do without. And you'll see it's a very different way of doing things, but it's also a very good way of doing things, and you can see how quickly you can do that. Now, how do you build mashups? Again, there are a few different ways. Like you create things from here, you can create a mashup as a separate thing. By the way, I'm going to actually, before I do anything, I'm going to create a new project, for this session. So I'm going to just call it the assembly dashboard session, right? I'm just going to save it so that we can logically assemble all the data. And I'd recommend you do that also. And when I go to new, I'm going to set the project dashboard, project context, so that every time I use this, it'll be storing under that project, and then we can view it in project view. So I'm going to create a new mashup just to show you what Mashup Builder looks like. I mean, of course, we've already seen it. It asks you, they used to be static and responsive mashup before, but now those are legacy formats. Now you should always select responsive. We're not going to go with any templates. We don't want headers and footers. We'll modify it ourselves. You just click OK. You have to give your mashup a name. So what I'm going to call it is just simply, test mashup. Again, the names have to be unique across ThingWorks. So if I've got a name that's already there, it says it's not unique, so that's fine. So I'll just call it, let's say, test mashup dashboard, just for the sake of it. Now, once you've done this, I mean, this is the key magic of the mashup builder happens under design. And I'm going to explain this a little bit more to you. Let me actually just go back to my slide. So this is Mashup Builder, which you can see on there. And before I go there, I just want you to be very aware of the different sections. Now, we've used Mashup Builder before, and it's been useful, but we've never really gone into detail about it. But today we're going to explore the real estate so that you can also become ninja experts at working with Mashup Builder. And once you do, you'll find how easy life is. So there are a few different parts of the mashup that are important, a few different parts of the real estate. So you can see the top left container, that was area 1. There are a few different tabs there. You have, and I'm going to show that to you on there. The main canvas where you will be dragging and dropping and putting things up is in the center. That's area number 2. Number 3 is your data area. So where you can bind data, all the data that you want to get from your things, how you bind it comes from 3. And you can also see there are session and user tabs. Session is, of course, if you're familiar with web development, you store session variables or session parameters. User variables could be like your username or the current user logged in. All their details come from there. We show you how to bind that. From here, 4, 5, and 6. 4 shows you the properties of the widget. So when you have a widget that you have, which you would add from the widgets tab here. Layout shows you all the layout properties, how you'd want to put different containers. So if you want to organize it into like 2 columns, 3 columns, it uses flex containers. It's all responsive, so it does get on there. And Explorer gives you a hierarchical tree view, and I'll show you that once we do that. But properties relates to widget properties. So the canvas, we fill the canvas with widgets. So widgets could be things like charts, they could be gauges, they could be data labels, they could be grids, and each widget that is placed into our canvas has certain properties. Some of these are data related properties. Some of these they've also got style properties. So they've segregated those two. You can use CSS also on this like you would with the web application. The area number 5 is really important because it shows you the bindings. One of the things that's really great about ThingWorks Mashup Builder is how you can bind data to widgets just by dragging and dropping. But if you want to review, like see what's the data flow, if you have like bound an event, for example, to something, you can see it all in bindings and it'll show you the flow. And area number 6 that you see at the right shows you specific data properties and functions. These are things that aren't related to widgets specifically, but are just related to business logic, and we'll be using those also. So I'm going to just skip back to. Okay, so just. If you click save, you'll know that you're still connected. So I'm just making sure because we already had one. Now, as I mentioned, the first step that you want to do when you're doing anything is you want to just say you want to add a widget. I want to add a list widget, for example. Before I do that, actually, let me just show you a few features of the layout, right? So right now we just have one container. And if you look at Explorer, you can see there's just one container there, which is an overall container, but maybe I want to split up my area into 2 responsive containers. So if I say add left, and even if this is just adding a container here, so you can see now there's a separate container inside. So it's just added a section. I can make it fixed size, and then the rest of it is responsive. So you can see a few different properties here. It's like it's set the fixed size, whereas this one is responsive, so it'll just expand to fill the rest of the space. But I can add, like once I've created that, I can keep on customizing it. I can add a bottom container here so that it splits this into. So you can keep doing a lot of things with layout. And we're not going to focus on this, but there are different things you can correspond. You can fix up. This is all based on Flexbox. So Flexbox, if you're familiar with that, Flexbox is a very great way to organize containers, which most web developers use these days. But we're not going to bother with this. Our main interest today is working with widgets. So I'm going to actually get started with for what I want to do is I want to have a list widget, which I'm just going to drop into one of these left containers. My list widget right now is I've not connected to anything. So it's just a different thing. If I go here and I show you a gauge, If I just say save, when I want to view what I'm creating here as you've seen before, I just click view mashup, right? And that just shows. These are unbound widgets, so they just show you, and you can see how there's no data associated with it, so that's why you have to do that. Now, we've seen this in the past. When you want to associate data, you come to the data tab, and you go there. For example, I'll just say, I want to get things from my template, right? I'd rather go through my template rather than going to the individual thing. I could go to the thing as my entity for the data, but by going to my template, I can manage multiple things. Assembly vehicle, get implementing things with data, which is a default service that's there, and I want to execute it on the page load. Once I do that, all I have to do to get the data bound is just drag from all data onto my list item, just bind that there, and I'd specify a couple of fields. My display field, which will be name, oh, sorry, and my value field. So just like any drop-down list, it'll be under there. Now, if I go back and I view the mashup, this is what I see. So I can actually see a selectable list of all the things that implement that, but it's not showing up on my gauge because I've not bound the gauge to that yet. To do that, I just actually take selected rows from my get implementing things, which will only give me the particular implementation that I have of the thing. So assembly car 1 or assembly car 2, and I would just take some value, maybe speed. And I'm just going to set speed, just bind it to data. And when I come back here, I'm going to set the max value to say 300 because speed can range. Normally by default, the gauges go from 0 to 100, but speed often goes above 100. So that's why I'm just going to do that. And then if I go back and I refresh my mashup, if I click on assembly car, I get a speed value for assembly car 1, and if I get a value for assembly car 2, I get a separate value there. So we've seen everything working. You can set up a mashup that quickly, where you can just we're going through data from a few different sources. This is just one way of doing this. You can also use, we've used in the past dynamic services. Dynamic services get you the individual implementation. Okay, so I'm going to just close this up and come back to my, let's just actually have a look at the project view again. So under project view, there are a few things, like I said, like you know what the thing template does. The thing template is the blueprint, and you can see all the properties and alerts are derived there. So all our properties that we've defined in the past, speed, position is a GPS coordinate, operator is a text value. There are some things that we are generating, like we fill in automatically. There are also events and subscriptions, which we've defined in the past. So like excess acceleration. So if the speed goes beyond a certain limit, or if it goes like the difference in speed is too much, then it runs this. So, there are some events set which automatictically fill in the values. We don't need to worry about that. We have fuel consumption, which is a net value, and we have mileage also, which is a net value. We defined a few services as well. Get fuel economy is just like it just divides the mileage by the fuel just to get a value. So it's a calculated value. So you can define custom services, and these can also be used in mashup, which we've done in the past. Update vehicle properties is something in particular that we have defined, which just generates a random value. So it generates a random position, a random speed, a random mileage, and a random fuel consumption, sorry. And the reason this is defined here is we are actually going to use a timer object, which is already created. Like you can see here, assembly simulation timer. This runs every 30 seconds, and it runs this function. If you look at assemblies, and by the way, you can see I've already bound to value streams. I'm not going to go over that again since we've already talked about it. So VS timer is the value stream for assembly simulation timer, whereas VS assembly vehicle is it's bound at the template level, so it's for all the items. There's nothing really written in assembly car 1. all the properties are inherited from the template. So you can see here, there's no separate thing. So you can keep creating objects here, and just by specifying a template, they get preset with values. Okay, coming back to the simulation timer. So this is derived from a specific type of template called timer. This is a system where I think this runs you can give it an update, so it's in milliseconds. So every 30,000 seconds, 30,000 milliseconds, which is 30 seconds, it runs a timer event, which we can capture and we can execute code for this. So I've already written a subscription here called update thing values, right? And all it does is it updates the values. It calls the update vehicle properties for individual things. So I'm calling it for assembly car 1, assembly car 2. You have to do it at this level. You can't do it at the template level here. It's all been set up in the code. This is code in JavaScript. All I have to do is enable it. Oh, I have to save and continue here before I do that. And then when I save here, and I want to go back and I want to activate my timer, so that by default, okay, it is already active. So what you're going to see is now they've activated the timer. If I go back to assembly car 1, so you have the properties here. Have a close look at the fuel consumption properties, the speed, position, and mileage properties. Now, if I go and look at that and I hit refresh, sorry, I'm just going to stop saving it first. So you can see the values are changing. Every 30 seconds, they will change. So right now, it was some, if you saw fuel consumption, it was a different value. But in 30 seconds, it is going to change. The same with position and speed. So you can see these, and we'll see them in our chart as historical values later on. So anyhow, this is really just more of a recap. You can see that the fuel consumption has changed, the position and speed has changed. So this is just a way using the timer to fill up values. The same is going on with assembly car 2 also. Remember, those are the two properties. So I just wanted to reacquaint you with these things which we've actually used in the past. If you look here, so fuel consumption, this is a good way to set up. So we're just using the timer to fill in values. You don't need to worry about this. This is just to give us some logged values. So it's changing the current value, but it's also changing the historical value, which will be useful when we look at our template. Now, what we need to watch quite carefully here is, let's go to I've got a preset dashboard. Now I use the term dashboard, but this is not the ultimate dashboard that we want to create, which is customizable and we can drag and drop around. This is just a regular dashboard, which we created at the end of our fleet tracking workshop. And if you look at it, let me just open it right up. This is what we built at the end of the fleet tracking workshop. So, and you'll see the values are actually changing right now. So we've got two vehicles. We've got assembly car 2 and assembly car 1. And assembly car 1 and 2, so the map is selectable. I can also, like, if I select from here, it'll alter the selection on the map. So the selections are bound. But you can see there are a few different things. Now, if you look at this, this is actually a route history. So you can see that, every 30 seconds, a new bit of it's actually moving. So it's live data. So you can see it's moving. Even the route history is changing because these are getting the logged properties. So the map on the left gives you the current value, the current location. The route history gives you the history of all the past and connects it as a map. Now we've organized it in tabs so you can see the different values as well. I've got a speed history here. So it's showing the speed, and on mouse over, you can see the different ones. And in fact, if you just switch between them, you'll see that it's actually changing. So it's changing every 30 seconds. So new points are getting added. The same way, the mileage is also changing. This is actually showing a proportional chart showing the mileage to fuel consumption, as well as the calculated value of fuel economy. And this is a historical table where we can see everything in like the other fields that we haven't mapped up, that we haven't put to widget. So we put a destination. So we haven't changed destination. So there's no history there. Last warning should show you whether it has excessively accelerated, but it seems there are no acceleration issues right now. And the operator, Of course, it's not been set. If you look at the dashboard, the way it's set up, I'm just going to minimize this section so that we can see it clearly. So I've defined everything in a single canvas. So this entire fleet dashboard is on one particular mashup. And that is not ideal for our situation. We want to actually split up all of these. So our map widget will be one separate mashup. This map widget will be another mashup. Our gauge will be another mashup, and all sorts of different things. And you can see the data connections. By the way, this is where you look at all the binding. So you can see the order in which we are we set up a kind of a data flow where after calling one function, we call another. This is all the data flow that happens in the background. You saw how we had done that in the previous function where we did with get implementing things. So get implementing things is a static template level function. But what you see above, these are all dynamic implementation level functions. So these are, implementation level services. So they are coming from the specific thing. So they're coming from assembly vehicle 1 and assembly vehicle 2 at runtime, rather than say coming at at compile time when we just can get a list of all the things that implement this. Okay, so what we want to do, and I'm just going to speed through this because I know we have a connection that is not working that well. So if you look at it, like query property history has gone and bound to this map, right? So query property history, all the data that's received, and that's where we're getting all the separate points in the route that's coming from live data, and then it is being bound on the map. Very similar to how we had done that before, okay? Now, the goal for us now is how do we get this? It's easy in this case, like we can bind data. So if you see here, like when we bind, entity name for the dynamic things is bound from the selected object under get implementing things. So I'm going to explain to you how this is. So when we select an item here, the selected item name, whether it's assembly car 1 or assembly car 2, is bound to the entity name of the dynamic service section, right? So this tells us that at runtime, to get the properties, get the values for assembly car 1. We don't know this at the time of compilation because obviously, we've not selected a particular item yet. We've just got a whole list of all the items, but we bind assembly car 1 as the entity name for which to receive. So it says, okay, at runtime, get the values for assembly car 1. So it's very important to understand that when we create separate gadgets, we have to have a way of communicating data between them also. So my gadget for showing a map, for showing a route history, should know which particular car to show that value for. So how does it do that? We're going to use session parameters for this. There are many different ways to do this. I'm going to cancel this. We don't really have to do much with assembly fleet dashboard. You can test it out. You can see, look under the hood once you've got that. So the first step that we have to do for this, I'm just going to make sure my project context is set. We want to create gadgets for individual things. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create session parameters. Let me just show you a little bit about session parameters also. I'm just going to go back to edit here. So apart from the regular data that we have we are added from things and different properties, you also have a tab here called session and user. Now we've already used user. If you see, I've got something which says logged in as unknown user. I've bound that to, and if you look at the mashup, you'll see it'll say logged in as Nikhil Suneja. Logged in as administrator or Nikhil Suneja, because I defined administrator as Nikhil Suneja. So that value is coming from user extensions, and that's all defined here. And you can see, so you can see my full name is bound. If I select this, you can see it is bound to this value display. So that's how it's getting my name. So similar to user variables stored in user extensions, ThingWorks also allows you to have session variables, which you can set in your user session, and you can use those to communicate information between different mashups. So I could send information to a different mashup by setting a value on my session parameter here. And then in the other parameter, I just look it up and I can get the data from there. So you can store lots of different things in session. I'm going to create a session parameter, which allows me to show the current vehicle. So the current vehicle. So in this case, like we were taking the vehicle by doing by either selecting it on the map or from the drop-down list. But I'm going to store the value in a session parameter so that it is accessible by another mashup. Okay, so I'm just going to cancel this. So what we need to do first for that is we need to do a little bit of work. We go back and we have to set up, we have to first set up a session parameter. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a thing shape first. And I'm just going to call it current, I could call it current thing shape, right? So my current thing shape, this is going to be my session parameter. This is the template for my session parameter, which will hold my value, which is the entity that it is supposed to correspond to. So just save that. And I'm going to go to properties and alerts. And I'm going to add just one property called current thing name. Okay. I'm going to give it a base type of thing name. So which means that it can only accept, it can't just accept any string, it has to accept a thing name. And I'm also going to give it another restriction. I've already got a template which I want to use to restrict what value can be put in here. So I'm going to put assembly vehicle here. What this does is that this property, because I've set it to this thing template, assembly vehicle, it can only accept a value that is a valid assembly vehicle. So an implementation of assembly vehicle. So it can only take assembly car 1 or assembly car 2. You put in any other value, it would give an error. But this will get stored. This will give me the shape of what will be stored for my session parameter. Okay, so we've saved that. Now I need to actually add it into the system. And to do that, I have to access, there is a particular, I have to browse to subsystems. So subsystems are just like default, oh, did I lose that? Subsystems are just default, things that you can, inbuilt. We've used some of these like for file management, which are just provided by ThingWorks, which allow you to tweak the interface and tweak the way the data flows. So user management subsystem allows me to add session parameters and custom session parameters that I can define. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to user management subsystem. Like anything, it's just got services and configuration. I need to go to a service, and I'm going to select a service called, what is it called? It's called add session shape. So I'm going to run this service, and by doing this, it'll add the thing shape that I have created, which was called current thing shape. And by executing this, it won't give you any results. It'll just add it. So now if I look at the session shapes and I execute this, it'll tell me that I've added a current thing shape here. So current thing shape actually is what I wanted to add. So we know this means this service has run. Let's just go ahead and create our first gadget. Now gadget, I said, is like a mashup, but at the same time, to create it, you don't create a new mashup, you create a gadget. You select gadget from here. And I'm going to just use a 1-column gadget because we don't really need to bother about. You can, your gadgets, according to how you want it to be visible there, it could fill up like maybe 2 columns if it's a map, but I just want to create a simple 1-column gadget. And I'm going to call it, let's start with speed gadget, right? It's not got a unique name, so I'm going to call it speed gadget 1. Right? So I've got speed gadget 1 there. And if again, when we go to design, it'll go back to just like a normal mashup. It'll tell you to migrate. Right now, the migration isn't working that well, so I'd skip that. It doesn't matter. We can use legacy widgets. So this is actually our widget, and this is how it's going to look once it goes up there. So I don't really need to change much here. In fact, even the title bar gadget title can be overridden at runtime. So I don't really need to bother with it, but I'm going to call it anyhow. I'm just going to call it speed. I'm going to drag a gauge in here. Now, what we want to do is we want to bind some data to it. I'm going to actually get the data. So I need to get the data for my widget should correspond to one particular car, for example, not correspond to the template. So I need to get it from a dynamic implementation. I want to get it from a specific value. So I'm going to, again, search for, I'm still going to go through the template. Sorry, from assembly vehicle. But instead of, I'm going to check on show dynamic services, which gives me a different set of services. These are services for the individual item, which will be bound at runtime. So I'm going to get properties from here. I'm going to execute this on load. Normally, because with dynamic properties, we don't execute on load, but I'm going to leave that on here. And like we usually do, I'm going to take the value, for example, speed, and just set it here to data and bind it. And at the same time, as I always do, I'm going to set max value for the gauge to 300. And then we save it. Now, like a regular mashup, you can view it, but you'll see something here. That it is just a regular mashup, but because we put a dynamic thing there, it has no data to actually come through because it doesn't know which item it's displaying for, right? So this is where what's important is our session variable will come in, right? And I hope our session will show up. So I'm going to just refresh the session and hopefully there. So current thing name has been added to our session parameters. So you can see that. So current thing name will be like our repository, which will be setting that. Now I'm going to take current thing name and drag and drop it to entity name. So this sets up a link from current thing name to entity name, and that tells us who it's there for, right? Apart from that, if our current, I want to also, like react if the current thing name changes. So if, for example, we switch the context from assembly car 1 to assembly car 2, I want to be able to say that, sorry, so I've got to select session. So I want to trigger get properties when that happens. So how do I do that? I'm going to go back to session. Now, one very handy thing is session creates a changed event for every single property. So in session. So I've just got to find current thing name change here and bind this to get properties. Okay. So what this does is that when the current thing name changes, when the session parameter changes, the session parameter value is taken and put towards entity name, and the property is retrieved from there. Okay, so this is one gadget that we've created. Let's just quickly create another gadget. We can just duplicate this, in fact, because we just want to create one. And I'm going to call it, say, location gadget _1. Right? And what I'm going to do here now is if I'm going to go back to design, it's actually just create an exact, I don't want a gauge here. I'm going to get rid of the gauge and I'm going to put a Google map in here. Okay, the Google map will be pretty small, obviously, because we're just doing one column. Normally we could do this with bigger columns and you could just put that in there. I'm going to actually take a different function here called get property values, which gives me the whole thing as well. Yeah, because what I need is I need the data as an info table. So I've got to get, so this brings all data as an info table and I just drag it, drop it to the map, click data. I should adjust the field values, of course. So my location field is, of course, position. I don't really need to change anything else there. And if I view the mashup, again, like with my speed gadget, it won't show me anything because I've not bound any data to it. I've not bound at runtime. But we've already seen session has been bound there. And we can look at all the. So current thing name is already bound to entity name, so it should work once we set that. Okay, so we've created our two gadgets here, location gadget and speed gadget. Now we need to create a gadget library from which the user can use to add to the particular system. So let's do that. Our gadget library is just a regular mashup. So I'm just going to create a mashup. It's just responsive again. And I'm just going to call it vehicle gadget library _1, just in case it's already been created. So vehicle _ gadget library. And all I have to do with vehicle gadget library is I have to just add 2 containers, right? On the left container, I want to add a contained mashup, which is so you just go to the mashups tab, and then you just go there and you select your particular gadget. So my location gadget, I'm just going to drag and drop it there. And in the right container, I'm just going to take my speed gadget and just drag and drop it there. That's it. That's all you need to create your gadget library. Okay. So once we've done that, again, you can view this and see what it looks like. It'll just contain the 2. It's a bit messed up because it's expanded fully and you can't see data bound there, obviously, because the session parameters have not been bound. But you get the idea about the layout. Now to actually create our dashboard itself. Now what we have to do for the dashboard, we have another step that we have to go through first. We have to create it in dashboard functions. So we have to search for an entity, go to search entities, and search for something called dashboard functions. Okay, dashboard functions is again, like we saw user management system, it's got a set of services. It's a resource that was a subsystem. We want to execute a function called create dashboard. Okay. And you just give it any title. That the title won't be that important. We'll call it vehicle dashboard mashup. And then you just execute and you'll get an ID here. It's not important to remember the exact ID, but this is how we can identify our dashboard individually. And we can, at least you should remember the first few digits so that, when you're selecting from a list, it'll be showing you the ID. So that you'll see why in a second. Okay, so now we need to actually create our dashboard item, which we're going to do through here. We're going to go to our mashup. We're going to create another mashup. This is going to be our vehicle dashboard. I'm just going to call it vehicle dashboard. Let's see if it saves. Oh, it does. Okay, so it's not unique. So vehicle dashboard, I want to edit. I want to set up. This is going to be where my entire add dashboard is. So I'm going to, again, add a container on the left. I'm going to make this a bit small. Like I did previously, I'm going to add my list here. Sorry, I'm going to add list from here. So I'm going to add the list. I'm going to modify a few things on list. Just give me a second. Yeah. See, we should auto select the first row so that it selects the first item there. So this is going to, again, I'm just going to save just to be safe. So like I did in the previous case, I'm going to add my assembly vehicle, and I'm going to call get implementing things with data. And that's going to be executed on load. It's going to bring me this. So all data, I'm just going to bind it here, bind it to data, then set my properties, my fields as name. So I just want to set it to the name rather than so that it displays name, and the same with this. The value field is also name. I do that. You'll see we have a way of selecting our vehicles, and there's a none valuable there. I think I can actually just let me make sure auto select is there and clear. Yes. Okay. So by unchecking that clear selection, it'll only show, it won't show a none value. So we've got something that alternates between this. Now we need to actually add our dashboard. And to do that, we use a widget called a dashboard. You just drag it and drop it. You've got that there. Select it. And you need to just set a few different things here. So you need to set, first of all, your library, your mashup to add, which is what we had set up our gadget library. So I'm going to just select the existing library that we had, vehicle gadget library, and we need to give it the dashboard ID that we set up. So the dashboard ID, it will give you a list, but you need to know what it looks like. And there you go. You can see this was the one I remember. It started with 8955. So you just select that. So by selecting these two properties, your dashboard is ready to go. And if you open it up now and you view in Mashup, so you can see your dashboard. Oh, sorry, before I do that, there is one step I skipped over. I do need to also make sure that I set my session variable. So what I'm going to do is current thing name. I need to set the value of current thing name to the selected thing in my list. So I'm going to go back to my return data and I'm going to go to selected row. And I'm going to take name. I'm going to drag it to, oh, sorry, I'm just going to reduce this so that I can see current thing name, which is there. And I'm just going to take my selected row, my selected name, and store it in my current thing name session. By doing this, my current thing is, the ID of my current thing is stored in the session and it is accessible to the mashups that pull from the, that pull otherwise. So my gadgets would be able to figure out which ID is selected in the list, even though it's in a different mashup. So now let's look at the mashup. So by default, your mashup is going to be empty. You can see other mashups also that are created before. There is a property there that you can hide it. So if you just go here and you click show tabs and you uncheck that, it'll only show you the current mashup. So I'm just going to refresh that. By default, your mashup contains nothing. You need to add a group. So I'm going to call it a group of, like, say, I'll just call it, let's just call it vehicle gadgets. So I'm going to create the group. And from within the group, I need to add my gadgets. Now this will open up my gadget library which we've already created. So this is just taking the embedded mashup and putting in there. I want to add both my speed, and you can change the name here, the gadget title, and just add it. And here also, I forgot to change the title there. So I'm going to just do that. In fact, so now that I have it here, I can rearrange it. I'm going to actually delete this gadget and re-add it because I want to change the title. But this is all being done, remember, at the user level. So our gadgets. So I'm going to add this. I'm just going to keep the name for that. But I can rename this and I can call it location, though I just kept the original one. Once I do that, my gadgets are saved as location and speed, but you can see they're bound as well. So I'm getting actual values, not just there. So my session parameter is joining there. I can create multiple groups. I can say group 2. And then I can drag and drop these widgets in between them. And the next time I log in, I will be able to see that again. So this way we can keep on creating different groups. I can create bigger bigger widgets and bigger things that we can do. And you'll see that it's bound to the value for each individual car. So if I change this, it's going to actually show me something different. So yeah, so as you can see, when you change this value, it is giving you different things there. So we have automatically set up a flow. And what's important to note here is that these are different mashups. So the mashup that you see inside here under location is completely separate from speed, and we've been able to exchange data between them. So for the first time, we've used what's known as contained mashups, and we can develop this further. You can write master pages, so you can develop complex things, and people could work on individual parts and just develop them accordingly. So this is pretty much what we wanted to show you, the crux of what we wanted to show you. You can, of course, experiment with this and do a lot more. I'm going to stop sharing now. Thank you to all of you who attended, and we will see you next time. I'll keep you posted on the session.